Hi, everyone. Welcome to Brattleboro's Town Matters podcast. This podcast is meant to be a brief update on what is happening in Brattleboro town government. I'm your host, Town Manager John Potter, broadcasting from the BCTV studios in Brattleboro, Vermont. Today, I will give you an update on the Selectboard's last meeting, which was held on June 3rd, and I will then give you a preview of what's on their next regular meeting, which will be on Tuesday, June 17th at 6:15 p.m. in the Selectboard meeting room at 230 Main Street or on Zoom. So June 3rd, there were 5 items on the consent agenda that the board approved. One item was a tobacco license and tobacco substitute endorsement permit for Sam's Glass World out in West Brattleboro. There was on the consent agenda approval of the annual dog warrant, which has all the names of dogs who had previously been licensed but did not renew them. So if you're on that list, make sure you get it addressed soon. There was approval of Out in the Open's parade permit, and there was approval of a permit for the Red Clover Rovers Fun Run, which will happen on July 4th. And the 5th item on the consent agenda was a grant agreement amendment in the amount of $36,452 for the 250 Burge Street floodplain restoration project. So as I mentioned, all those items were accepted by the board and approved 5-0. Under regular business on June 3rd, the first item was Indivisible Brattleboro came to speak with the Select Board about a rally and a march on June 14th that they have submitted a parade permit for. And they expect up to 1,000 people and will have sound amplification and food trucks. They are planning to march on the east side sidewalk from Center Church up to the Common and crossing at Putney Road and then having speeches and music at the Common. So this will be on Saturday, June 14th. The town shared with the organizers that the plans for an event of this size will be somewhat costly to the town, and we are having some pressure on the budget, so that information was conveyed. The board asked that staff look into a policy for cases like this in the future. But the board moved to approve the parade permit for Indivisible Brattleboro, and so that will be held on Saturday, June 14th, and that passed by a motion of 5-0. The next item discussed on June 3rd was a pickleball court project. This is a project that Recreation and Parks Director Carol Lalott has been putting together to renovate the courts up on Living Memorial Park up by the skating rink from what they have been 2 tennis courts into now the proposal is to do 6 pickleball courts there and then allow tennis to happen under a memorandum of agreement out at the Brattleboro Union High School courts and sharing those courts with the public and vice versa, sharing the pickleball courts with the school. And so that was an update from Carol on that. But she also brought the question to the board of accepting the second lowest bid on a bid to do this pickleball court project. And she was recommending the second lowest bid because it's a local company that will hire mostly local subcontractors. So the board discussed that and they moved to accept the bid for the pickleball court project from DMI Paving for a total of $129,987, and that passed by a vote of 5-0. Next item on their agenda that night was the fiscal year 26 draft utility budget, and DPW Director Dan Tyler and Assistant DPW Director Pete Lynch brought a draft budget to the board, and they discussed the utility budget for both water and sewer and the capital plan for that. The board members asked if there were areas that they could trim further. They also discussed potential earnings and requested when the staff come back with a decision on the utility budget at their next meeting that they also look at a flat rate increase rather than a 99333, which was recommended by the utility rate study that the board recently heard about. So there was no motion on that item, but they had a first preview of the utility budget, and also had a similar update and preview of the fiscal year 26 parking budget. For that one, Assistant Police Chief Jeremy Evans and Highway General Supervisor Darren Pacheco shared the draft parking budget with the board and discussed the collaboration that's been going on between the police department and DPW on the parking program. They talked about the 2025 deficit in the budget and sort of why that's come about. It was planned to be a deficit, but they reported that they're expecting it to be larger than initially planned. They also discussed the potential, if certain adjustments aren't made, for a continuing deficit in next year, although the gap was closing. They also discussed ways to keep the lots cleaner and safer, revenue from permits, issues around the Brattleboro Transportation Center rentals. They talked about Sunday parking and loading zones. And finally, there was a discussion about adjusting the permit fees based on supply and demand. There was some feedback from the board, and the staff are going to incorporate that into bringing back a revised parking budget to the board at their next meeting for consideration on a decision. Following the parking budget item, the board took up a water tank necessity resolution and approved a necessity resolution for the Pleasant Valley Water Storage Replacement Bond article, and that passed by a vote of 5-0. The final item on June 3rd was committee appointments. There was a slate of uncontested committee positions that the board passed by a vote of 5-0. The next Select Board meeting is a regular meeting scheduled for Tuesday, June 17th at 6:15 p.m. in the Select Board meeting room at 230 Main Street and on Zoom. And this is what will be on the agenda for that meeting. On the consent agenda, there are, 8 items on the consent agenda, and they are bids for crack sealing to happen on the roads this summer, approval of a updated outside consumption permit for the Retreat Farm, approval of a first and third class liquor license for Rail and River Tavern. Also on the consent agenda is appointment of an interim trustee for the library and acceptance of a project manager service contract for the Brooks Memorial Library Capital Improvement Grant, the big grant where they're doing improvements on the library. Approval of a first-class liquor license and outside consumption permit for the Retreat Farm Market Patio. Approval of a tobacco license and tobacco substitute endorsement for SKH Sales 2 Corporation, and a second-class liquor license for SKH as well. And then finally on the consent agenda is a parade permit application for Brattleboro Goes Forth. Under regular business for June 17th, first there'll be a discussion around the fiscal year 26 utility budget, so that's bringing the utility budget back for a decision, followed closely by the same thing for the parking budget. So a decision on the fiscal year 26 parking budget also will be on the agenda for June 17th. The next item on the agenda is a decision around maintenance or replacement of Brattleboro Fire Department's fire car number 2. There will be an item on the Select Board retreat, and so the board will have a chance to discuss their planning for a retreat to be held sometime later in June or in July. And then the last 2 items for June 17th are a discussion around Depot Street and some riverfront improvements that Planning Director Sue Fillion will bring to the board to get their feedback on that. And then the final item is committee appointments, so other committee appointments that had yet to be filled. So that's June 17th. I have a couple of announcements. The 3rd annual Juneteenth art exhibit and sale will be returning to the Municipal Center. We're excited to feature 2 returning artists, Mwanga William, who participated in the first year, and Candace Taylor Diallo, who's returning from last year with new works in a new medium. That art will be displayed on the ground floor of the Brattleboro Municipal Center from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. The show begins June 16th and will run weekdays through the end of June. The Town of Brattleboro's annual Juneteenth Art Show showcases the work of local Black artists and provides a space for participants to display and sell their work. So come check it out. The Vermont Agency of Transportation has scheduled multiple paving projects to take place this construction season and into 2026 throughout Brattleboro and on U.S. Route 5 from Brattleboro to Putney. The majority of the work on all parts of these projects has been scheduled to occur during typical nighttime hours as an effort to minimize the impacts to traffic. Over the course of construction, email updates will be provided weekly on construction activities and traffic impacts. If you'd like to be included on the distribution list to be kept updated, visit brattleboro.gov and visit the news section for a link to sign up for those email alerts. Been getting a bunch of questions about the Hinsdale bridges, and I updated the Select Board recently that the Hinsdale Select Board has a draft joint letter from the two Select Boards to New Hampshire DOT on the bridges project, and we expect to hear back from Hinsdale whether they want to sign on to the Select Board's letter or offer revisions by June 17th. Also, I wanted to quickly mention that the Vermont Emergency Management Project Review Committee has identified the Detman Bridge Replacement Project up at Tri-Park for funding through the 2023 Flooding Hazard Mitigation Grant Program funding round. The application will go from here to FEMA, and if approved by FEMA, the grant will cover the entire $1.7 million bridge replacement project up there. So that is great news if that moves forward. That's what's been happening in town government in Brattleboro. Please reach out to me at the town manager's office if you have any suggestions or want to discuss anything further. There's lots of additional information on the town website, brattleboro.gov, about what is discussed at the Select Board meeting, so please check in there for agendas, reports, and backup materials. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you soon, Brattleboro. Thanks.